Hello again, and welcome to Maps of Becoming, the Eudaimonia podcast. This is episode 2, and my name is Edwina Murphy-Droomer. I want to begin this episode really with a clear intention and understanding of why you might want to join me on this conversation and for hopefully all future conversations. The work that I do and my intention with this podcast is really centered in supporting you to know yourself so well that self-trust and self-love never waver. To know all the different aspects of you, the different archetypes that support you and drive you, but also how those archetypes can cause you to stumble or feel stuck. So today what I want to do is I'm going to give you another piece of my story. If you tuned in last week, I talked at length about the rupture of my first marriage, the breakdown, and the rhythm that we see in all fairy tales of rupture, retreat, return, and rise. And so there is another aspect of my story, and it's interesting when I completed the first episode, and obviously nothing is scripted. I think this is all just conversation that comes straight from my heart. And I got off finished recording that first podcast, and there was a lot of hesitation to actually publish it because I could see all the bits that were missing. I think it's like when somebody comes to your home, you're super aware of all the bits of housework or all the parts of a meal or that are possibly not exactly what you wanted, but nobody else notices. It's that fixation of all the things in our own heads that say this is not good enough, this is not complete, and the willingness to just accept that and the courage to know that it's all okay, to know that as a conversation like this, the next piece will come through in divine timing when it's supposed to know that in your home, nobody else cares that the towels in the linen cupboard aren't folded to perfection. These are the little complexities that our minds come up with that cause us to stumble, that cause us to feel not good enough, to cause us to feel not connected to the potential that we have within us to live the life that our soul yearns for. So what I'm going to do in this episode is give you the next piece of the puzzle, which was the meeting of my second husband, which began with an extraordinary 3-day connection when he was on holiday in Australia from South Africa, but I'll get to that. So what I want to do first is take you on a bit of a journey using the first 9 major arcana cards from tarot. Why? Because part of the best way that I know to really connect you to all the pieces that are you is to support you to understand the archetypes that live within all of us, the archetypes that are the potential and the living wisdom, all the bits. So these archetypes are everywhere. So Jung talked about them, who's a Jungian psychologist, and they're in fairy tales, which is why fairy tales are used a lot by psychologists. They're in the gene keys, which is one of my favorite tools, which is a set of archetypes that has been published and put out into the world by Richard Rudd. They're in tarot. They're, these ancient tools that have been alive, the I Ching, that have been alive for hundreds and some thousands of years. So they are alive in every human. They are in us and all around us. And to not understand them is to not know ourselves and to not know the world around us. So let's dive in. The first card, the very first card in tarot, in the major arcana, is the Fool. Now, when we think about the Fool, we think about stupidity or ignorance or not knowing. And this is, I think the first thing that comes to mind when I think about the Fool is April Fool's Day. What we've done to language and what we've done to our connection to these archetypes is slowly but surely undermine all of them, so that we have this sense of, when we think about the High Priestess or we think about the Empress, there's this sense of the ridiculous. There's this sense of fantasy and disconnect from the role, the being that they are in all of us. So the Fool is, in much wiser language, innocence. So if we think of a brand new baby that comes into the world, a brand new baby comes in innocent, but infinitely intelligent. So the intelligence that lives within all of us is the intelligence to understand the messages from our senses. And of course, from a baby to wherever we are in our lives now, as we move through each chapter of our lives, we're connecting more and more deeply to that intelligence. But it's there from the moment we're born. The infinite potential, possibility to become exactly who we were born to be lives within that intelligence. Intellect that we gain from going to school or university or conversations with other people or, books or podcasts. Intellect is very much the mind. Intellect is very much the masculine, where intelligence is the feminine, keeping in mind that both live within all of us, whether we are male or female. So the intelligence that the Fool has is the beginning. The intelligence is the understanding of all the elements. It is the knowing without the intellect. So the Fool is I begin. And it's the thing that's fun to really connect to and to understand is that the Fool is the beginning of any, you can have a Fool energy at the beginning of every day. At the beginning of every day, there's a sense of, I believe I know what today is going to bring. But with an open heart and an open mind, there is infinite potential and possibility within a single day. But if we think about it in terms of different chapters in our lives, there's the beginning of a baby who is like a literal sponge that's soaking in everything from the external environment to learn and grow with an open heart and an open mind. And then, we get to maybe 7 going into school and grade 1 and, there's more learning, and there's learning about friends, and there's learning about the world in a bigger and bigger way. There's another chapter. And then there's the beginning of life beyond school. The day you leave school and launch yourself into womanhood is a full moment. There is a full moment that follows the birth of a baby. There is a full moment that follows the start of a new job. There is a full moment that follows a last child leaving home. And so for me, that was at 53. And it's like, okay, so now what? Now what? So that is the Fool. And the older we get, the more we get to connect to this energy. Because if we don't, what happens is a life of sameness, a life of avoiding change, a life of avoiding fear, a life of avoiding discomfort. All the discomforts that we embrace in youth, in starting a new job, starting university, starting school, starting, motherhood, starting a new relationship, embarking on a new journey. There is a support from the society around us that's a natural evolution. So we have the support to do it. But the older we get, the less that support exists, and the less inclined we are to put ourselves in situations as a fool. The desire, the crushing desire to not look stupid, to not look foolish, to not look like a beginner is the very thing that robs us of life force and growth and evolution of who we are here to become. So if nothing else from this podcast, I so hope that you will reconnect to the full energy. It is the full archetype within you that is the one who will start a dance class for the first time in your 50s or 60s or whatever it is. It is the one who will put yourself forward for a new friendship or a new relationship. It is the one who will embark on a new career path. It is the one who will learn a new art form, a new way of creating and expressing yourself without all the fear of judgment and what other people might think. This is life force energy in its purest form. So we have the Fool, and then we have what is traditionally known in tarot as the Magician. Now, the Magician, the name the Magician for me carries a masculine energy that makes me feel disconnected from this magical archetype. So I call her the Elemental Witch. So this archetype is the archetype that understands the power of being connected to through intelligence, not intellect. It's just the knowing. There is no mind that undermines that knowing. It is pure. And so it is the knowing that we are water, we are air, we are fire, we are earth. We are of this world. As above, so below is the knowing of this archetype. So yes, we think it's for me thinking about it in terms of an elemental witch who uses the elements to create power feels deeply aligned. I can feel that. One of the journeys in my life, one of the chapters in my life was when I decided to study naturopathy and become a naturopath. And it connected me to the power of the food that Mother Earth gives us, to the power of water, rather than just taking it for granted as something that you drink or something that you wash in or something that just is. It's the connection to the power that water holds for life. The connection to fire. So in tarot, there's the minor arcana, which is cups, wands, pentacles, and swords. And so these are simply expressions of these elements. And so it comes up in all the different aspects. And as you slowly reconnect or more deeply connect to all of these elements, you start to see where those elements hold the power of your potential. So if the most easily understood is the swords, and the power of air is for us, our thoughts. And it's represented by swords because swords there's two sides to it. There is the power of our minds to create extraordinary things, to build. It is the symbol of power, but it's also the symbol that cuts us and undermines us. In the major arcana, it's like the devil. It's the thoughts, the mean girl in your head that says, don't do that, everyone will think you're a fool. If you have a go at painting and paint something and people think it's stupid, that means it's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's not good enough. As opposed to, no, this is my first attempt. And it's like the seed that's going to blossom into a masterpiece because I'm learning and I'm willing to learn. It is the learning to cook. When we think about witches, we think about a depiction of something that has almost an evil connotation to it, especially for those that have grown up in religious circles. So witches were demonized and burnt at the stake for delivering babies, to working with the elements, with nature, to do what is the most natural thing imaginable, because it was deemed witchcraft. To take away from the men, because at that point only men were allowed to go to university to become doctors that were then qualified to help women to birth babies, rather than the grandmother who had birthed her own babies and then supported her daughter to birth babies, and the knowing, in balance with the mind, but the knowing to support this. So if witch has a connotation in your mind that disconnects you from this archetype that lives within you, then find the language that works for you. Words hold enormous power, and the meaning that we give words holds enormous power. So choose a language that works for you if this creates a disconnect. But also I invite the exploration of what witch means to you. Okay, so in following the thread, the fool is I begin. The elemental witch or the magician is I will. It's the will within. And then we move to the high priestess. The high priestess is I know. She's your intuition. I know. There's a very famous quote that was taken from an interview with Carl Jung, and the question was, do you believe in God? And Jung said, I don't believe, I know. So what is that knowing for you? What is the knowing that you cannot be moved from, that anchors you? One of the ways that I like to think about this is through our values. What do you know to be true? For me, my values are nature and love. Brene Brown, who was my mentor through this work, her values are courage and connection. From this, you cannot be moved. A belief is something that can be changed. A belief is, I vote for this political party and they are correct and I've done it for the last 2-3 decades, whatever it is. There is a belief there, but that belief can be changed and it will stay a belief. A belief is all teenagers are hard work and it is a time in life to be survived rather than embraced. You know, we take on belief systems from our parents, from teachers, from our experience of life like that baby that's a sponge, and we soak in all of these beliefs. But the high priestess in you knows. When you think back over your life and you think about, I call them red flags. When you think about red flags that you've ignored because you wanted something to be true, you wanted to believe you were right, and that overrode the knowing within you that you were out of alignment with your truth. So the experience that comes to mind as I talk about this with you is I knew there was a knowing in me that my first husband was not my life partner. But I didn't want that to be true. What I wanted to be true was that I had found my knight in shining armor, that he loved me unconditionally, and that we were going to be happily ever after. I wanted that to be true so much that I ignored the knowing. I ignored the red flags within me that knew that this wasn't a divine union. The high priestess knows. She lives in you and she is your North Star. She is the voice of wisdom within that is wiser than the one in your head, that gets to guide you from this moment forward. So we've looked at the Fool, I begin. We've looked at the Elemental Witch, I will. We've looked at the High Priestess, I know. And now we come to the fourth card. So the zero is, the third card, sorry. 0 is the Fool. 1 is the Elemental Witch or the Magician. 2 is the High Priestess. And 3 is the Empress. So the Empress is the Mother Earth archetype. She is the fertile body. She is the creator. She is abundance. She is unconditional love, but she's also ferocity. You know, if we think about the wild woman archetype, she's in this Empress. So there is the storm and the volcano and the cyclone, as much as she is tranquility and serenity and wide open blue skies and sunshine. She's all of it. So she is the natural cycles of life. She is the life, death, life mother. She is autumn, winter, spring, and summer. And within our human selves, we have all of these cycles. We cycle in harmony with the moon through our menstrual cycles, through our emotional cycles. We are the human embodiment of Mother Earth. And this should not need to be said, but for some it does. It has no bearing on whether or not you've had children. The mother archetype is nature and she is nurture. So when you think about this archetype, you can see through your own life where the desire to give is innate. The thing that pulls so many women out of alignment is giving to the expense of themselves. Society has taught this to be something to be proud of, to give to the point where we are so depleted we have nothing left. So that is a shadow side of the Empress. So to come back into alignment is the knowing that we get to fill our own cup so full to overflowing, that everybody around us gets the overflow. That's responsibility. And I'm going to come to the Emperor in a minute, but the Emperor is the responsibility archetype. But the Empress is the mother, the being, the feminine, the creator, the abundance, the love. Nature and nurture. To give is to receive is a philosophy of the Empress. And for those that didn't join the online series that I did last year called Embody the Empress, you'll find that on my YouTube channel. And there's, I can't remember how many conversations, maybe 20 conversations that I had with other women about this beautiful archetype and how it plays out in their stories. So that's a resource for you to dive into. I love this archetype. So the next one, the fourth card in the major arcana, is the Emperor. And the Emperor is responsibility. So the Emperor is the father archetype. So the best way that I know to describe this for women to connect to it is that the mother is the creator of it's the imagination, the intuition, the creation within. And then to bring that creation into the world with structure and rules and logic, and it's the idea. So the feminine, the Empress, is the picture of your dream life, the picture of your dream business, the picture of your dream relationship, the picture of the life that your soul yearns for, lives within the imagination. But then the Emperor is the one that builds it. So it is the mothering. So the mother births the baby, but then the Empress births the baby, but then the Emperor is the one that organizes all the lunchbox and makes sure that they get to school on time and teeth are brushed and everybody's into bed on time. It's like what I called the military operation as a single mother with 4 children. In order for our days to run with structure and responsibility and a sense of stability, my Emperor needed to kick in, needed to be the one that got things done. So the Emperor in you, if you're an entrepreneur and you're dreaming of this business that you want to build, you're dreaming of, it could be a charity, it could be an online business, it could be a brick and mortar business, whatever it is, the dream starts within the Empress. The dream is the creation of the project, the creation of the beautiful piece of artwork, whatever that is here. And then, and I apologize, I realize that I'm so used to doing everything on video that those of you that are listening only on audio, I'm indicating my inner world, in my heart. The inner world is the Empress. And then there's this birthing into the world, and then the Emperor is the one that must do what needs to be done in order to build it. So the Emperor is responsibility. The Emperor is the one that leads. The Emperor is the action, satisfaction, the doing. So the Emperor is, I decide. The certainty, the structure, the security, the one that takes action. So then we come to the Hierophant. The Hierophant is number 5. And the Hierophant is the wise leader. In tarot, the Hierophant has traditionally been represented by almost like a pope-like figure. But I feel like the great change that is happening and the rise of feminine intelligence coming into balance with masculine intellect, because for the last however many 100 years or whatever, the intellect has been dominant at the expense of intelligence. And so what's happening in the world now is the rise again of the intelligence, the ancient knowledge, the tradition. And so the Pope in this archetype holds no connection to me. It feels like a complete disconnect between that archetype and myself. So the way that I think about the Hierophant is as the guide, the one who has been on the journey of life, collecting wisdom, not intellect, wisdom. It's the wisdom that comes through lived experience. It is the woman who has given birth that supports another woman to give birth. It is the woman that has been through divorce and come out the other side empowered that supports another woman to go through divorce. It is the woman who has experienced the death of a loved one and come out the other side wiser and stronger and supports another woman to navigate that experience. It is the support of the woman that has built a business and had it falter and found a way to bring it back to life or to leave it behind with grace and move on. It is the woman that has learned how to nourish her body, to fall in love with herself, to fall in love with other people, to navigate forgiveness and embody it wholeheartedly, to navigate all the myriad of experiences that encompass the journey of becoming. The disconnection from God, Mother Nature, the universe, and then the reconnection to God, Mother Nature, the universe. The spirit within, the human without, the whole fabulous fullness of who we are. So in the world around us, the feminine Hierophant is one of the most valuable archetypes on the planet. She is the wise woman, she's the grandmother, the mother, the one who has lived and learned and now is passing on her wisdom. The Hierophant is I lead. So when you think about this in terms of your own life, there is the High Priestess that is I know. There is the Empress that is I am one with the world around me. And there's the Hierophant that is I lead myself. Rather than looking for other people to be your leader, it's walking shoulder to shoulder with other women, leading yourself in harmony with other women. And now we come to the 6th card, which is the Lovers. So to give you a story that goes with the archetypes that I've talked about and a picture of the Lovers, it's easy to hear the Lovers and to think purely external, but it's internal first and external second. So when my first marriage broke up, the rupture, the extremely heartbreaking, identity destroying rupture that was the breakdown of my first marriage. There was what followed that, really, the emergence and the becoming of me. So if we go from rupture to retreat, there is this reconnecting to self. To think about retreat, we want to think about the reconnecting to the high priestess, to the I know, reconnecting to the elemental witch, which is I will. You know, I will is the thing that pulls you forward in life. It is the knowing that with time, with patience, with resilience, with inner knowing, we can do anything. And so when my first husband walked away, I had 4 children under 8, no job, a small farm that still needed to be maintained. And I was really starting from ground zero in my sense of power and my sense of self. What I did have was a really clear connection to the Empress. But the High Priestess was at that point fairly absent. And so the retreat stage for me was reconnecting to I know, reconnecting to the knowing that I knew what was best for me and I trusted what was best for my children, and building slowly and surely from there. So the journey, as I shared, was going, you know, we packed up the farm. It took about a year, and then it was 9 months, which is actually an interesting rebirthing phase. And then we had a little beachside house that, as I shared in the first episode, had no insulation and, you know, ants crawling through the kitchen, and it was very basic. And that was part of the retreat phase. It was like, okay, so I'm leaving this part of my life behind. There was a physical movement away from community that I had. There was a physical movement away from a beautiful little farm that we had, from place to a new place. And so there was a leaving behind of the life that I had. That was the rupture. The retreat was going to this little beachside house with my 4 babies as we started to find our feet again, and I connected to my knowing. It was actually where my youngest son learnt to walk, and it's really, that is the depiction of, you know, that experience in our lives, you know, whether it's following the grief of the death of a loved one, or a divorce, or the loss of a job or a career path that you imagined was going to be your forever. Whatever that rupture experience is, what follows is a finding your feet again. The rupture is when the rug is pulled out from under your feet. The retreat is finding your feet again. And the return is when you start to learn to walk in a new identity, in a new chapter, in a new part of your life. And so that return began for me when we found the flower farm. And in that return, if we think about it as the spring archetype, it's like the daisy that cracks through the concrete. It is the new bud. It's like there's a slow blossoming. It's a trial and error. There's pain and there's mistakes and there's learning and there's all the things. There's navigating all the seasons through that phase. But the more that you navigate it with the witch, with the elements, being so connected to the natural world and the elements that live within you, the more you connect to your knowing unapologetically, without bending to the judgment and opinions of other people. So for me, this was, there were decisions that I made for my children that were really in conflict with what a lot of the world around me said was correct. But there was an inner knowing within me that my choices were going to be different. And that was hard. But for my children, that power within me grew. The ferocious mother that was unapologetic and unmovable in her values started to really, the image that's coming to mind as I talk about it is the oak tree that's moving from being a sapling to being a really strong, grounded presence on the earth. And I did that for my children. And I wonder to this day whether I could have found that within me without being a mother. But I'm sure that God, Mother Nature, the universe would have given me another opportunity to learn. But I invite you to think about where that really grounded, unmovable power within you, when that started to rise and when you really felt it. And if you can think back to it and connect to it. So from that place, I became the magician, the elemental witch, grounded. I became the high priestess. I knew. I became the empress. I became the emperor. And I became, in many ways, the Hierophant, although I feel like that part of me is something that has blossomed more in the last decade. But she was growing. And if we think about ourselves as being every part of our lives, past, present, and future, I am Edwina Eleanor that was 1 day old. I am Edwina Eleanor that was 7 years old. I am Edwina Eleanor that was 14 years old. I am Edwina Eleanor that was 21 years old. And so on and so on. I am also Edwina Eleanor that's going to be 54 tomorrow. I'm her now. I am Edwina Eleanor that's going to be 60, 70, 80, 90. I am. So I was the Hierophant, but I was the Hierophant in seed form, in blossoming, in the becoming. My map of becoming, I can see where she really started to plant her roots. So then we come to the lovers. So this is the story that I hinted at sharing at the beginning of this podcast. So when we had our 12 months at that little beachside house where my youngest child learned to walk and my eldest child was 8, probably 9 at that point, we lived right on the beach, and there was just a little gravel car park between us and the beach. And so my eldest son would wander across and sit on the beach and watch. He loved to watch the Hobie crafts, the little sailing boats, go out. And so he would go over and watch. And one day he connected with a man, a gorgeous man, who played came to be that he played a very pivotal role in our lives. But he offered to teach my eldest son Oliver to sail, and he came and spoke to me, and we created a beautiful friendship. He became a really extraordinary source of friendship for me in a new world that I was finding my feet in. And as time went on, I obviously got to know his story more, and he was South African, and he talked about his brother who was dying, and he went back to South Africa and he spent time there, and then there was a bit of back and forth, and eventually his brother passed away, and he went over for the funeral. And when he came back, he invited his nephew to come back with him. His nephew had just been through a divorce. He had two young adult children, and he decided to come on a grand adventure to Australia. And there was another friend that met his nephew before I did. And there was a conversation of like, you two need to meet. I think you're going to get on really well. And there was a bit of matchmaking going on that I knew nothing about. And I don't think Laurie knew anything about. Laurie is Jack's nephew. I don't think he knew anything about it either. But eventually they conspired and brought us together. And there was a first meeting that was a lot of checking out without much connection. But then a second meeting, we went to a vineyard, and it was there that we really started talking. And I invited to take him on a road trip to an area there where I live that he hadn't seen before. And from there we had 3 days together that were an explosion of feelings and emotions, and that knowing of, oh my gosh, I've met someone and he's going to leave the country in 3 days. And so I think for me in that experience, there was a freedom in knowing he was leaving because it took the pressure off. As a mother of 4, I had said for a long time that I didn't have room. I'd been a single mother for 7 years at this point. I didn't have room in my life for anybody else. My whole world revolved around my children. But I feel at this point, the universe had different ideas. God, Mother Nature, the universe had different ideas. And so it was fate that we met and had these 3 extraordinary days together. And then the devastation and the heartbreak when we said goodbye and he left. And we then spent the next near year courting on Skype. So building a relationship, getting to know each other, really diving into all the questions, all the conversations, until we got to a point where it was like, I want to come back. He said, I want to come back to Australia and I want to see if we can make this work. And I was like, well, I feel like if you're going to come to Australia, I need to come to South Africa first so that at least your girls, your adult girls, know who you're leaving South Africa for. And to this day, I don't know how I coordinated that through the generosity of family and friends around me who stepped in and looked after the kids. And I think I was gone for 10 days. And so I went over and met his daughters and met his mother and spent a magical 10 days in Cape Town. We climbed to Lion's Head, the top of Lion's Head, for anybody that knows South Africa, knows Cape Town. And my girlfriends thought it was hilarious because I'm the opposite of sporty spice. But I got myself some, walking shoes, and we walked to the top of Lion's Head. And Laurie proposed to me. And I said to him at that point, I can't say yes because I'm a package deal. There's actually 4 other people in this picture. And so he accepted that. And eventually came to Australia and we had time together, and then he asked me again and I said yes. Now, what I want to share from this story is that when I asked Laurie, I asked him because I was just in awe of anybody that was, I couldn't comprehend that somebody would pack up their life for me in another country, move to Australia, which involved leaving behind financial stability, because the money that was abundant in South Africa suddenly became worth a lot less in Australia because of our exchange rates. So the nest egg that he had built was damaged by that move, the financial stability, but also just the responsibility of taking on a wife and 4 children after he'd already raised his own children, like all the things. I just couldn't comprehend that, you know, his emperor was, I didn't have the language at the time, but his emperor is just unfathomable, however you say that. And he said, I said, you know, what is it? How, why, what is it about me, you know, fishing? And he said, you don't need me. And so it's a partnership. And what I want to pass on from this, because I've thought about it a lot, is that during that retreat stage, I had built such a strong connection with all of these archetypes, even though I didn't have connection to this language then. But I was so solid in myself that I didn't need anybody else. I had built a beautiful life. And so anybody that I connected with, it was going to be a partnership. So when we think about the lovers as an archetype, it is the divine balance of masculine and feminine within us. The feminine knows. The Empress is the Earth Mother. She is intuition. She is the nourish, the nurture, not just of other people, but of self. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and I had rebuilt a life around me from the ground up through these archetypes. So the masculine and feminine within me was balanced. And so when Laurie and I met, there was this sense of not being needed, but being in partnership. And so when those come together, and Laurie was the same, he had been through all his own ruptures and retreats, and now in a new return for him, it was the same. His inner feminine and his inner masculine were balanced. And so when these come together, it's like head and heart. And this is the lovers. This is the way that I want you to think about the lovers. The inner knowing and the ability to take action and do, to create, to build your own life with responsibility, with love, with intuition. That's the first step. And if we taught this to every child, I believe the world would be a very, very different place. We don't need somebody else to complete us. Our job is to be a complete person and then to connect with another complete person, because then 1 and 1 makes 3. 1 and 1 creates a third energy that is divine. So that's the lovers. The other thing he said to me is, your love knows no bounds. And I've received 3 compliments in my life that have stuck with me. And that's one of them. To be seen like that is the greatest gift, because our minds will tell us that we're never enough. Our minds will tell us that we don't know enough, that we're inadequate in all sorts of different ways. So to catch a glimpse of yourself through another person's eyes is the greatest gift. And you will find along your journey through life that you will meet different mothers, different empress archetypes that can see you through the eyes of a mother. And I've been very fortunate to have a few mothers in my life like that, mentors, girlfriends. And the 3 compliments that I want to share with you are: your love knows no bounds. You being you allowed me to be me. This is the power of being a grounded woman and the power of absolute, unapologetic authenticity. And the third one I actually received in response to my first podcast from a woman that I've never met, never connected with before. But she said that I was a stranger. Oh, now I'm going to forget it as I think of it. Oh my goodness. A stranger who feels like home. Oh my goodness. When I read that, it just there was this instant unlocking of a well of emotion. It just rose up in me and the tears poured down my face. It feels like I'm going to cry again now when I think about it. Because if I could put into words why I do what I do, it's for this reason. I became the woman that I wish I'd had in my life. And so in the work that I do now, to be that woman for other women is everything. That's why I'm here. It's my life purpose and my life's work. I feel like from this, I want you to connect to compliments that you have received that have been defining confirmation of your identity, of who you know yourself to be. When you hear it, it's I know, not I believe, it's I know. Okay, we've got 2 more archetypes that I want to share with you before I wrap up this podcast. So the 7th archetype following the Lovers, which is I commit. So the Lovers is I commit. I commit to self, to love for self, to love for others, and to love for the world around me. Head and heart. So the 7th archetype is the Chariot. In the traditional tarot, we see the Chariot as a figure with 2 sphinxes, and one is black and one is white. So one is the unconscious, one is the conscious. One is the shadow, one is the light. One is the head, one is the heart. And to get to the point of the Lovers, of this divine union, which is happily ever after in fairy tales. It's not the end of the story. It's just a point in our becoming that comes and goes, and we reconnect. We get to the divine union But then we must move forward on our journey of becoming. And the chariot is the archetype that holds the balance between the head and the heart, that holds the balance between the masculine and the feminine, that holds the balance between the unconscious and the conscious, that moves through life in alignment with truth, with authenticity, with love. I will, I know, I nourish, I decide, I lead, I commit. I align is the chariot. Action, focus, this sense of teamwork within, but also teamwork in the world around you, teamwork with your life partner. Synarchy, equilibrium, harmony. These are words from the Gene Keys for those of you that are familiar with that work. But this is the archetype of the chariot that moves you into action. In order for the chariot to stay in harmony, in equilibrium, in balance, in movement, in alignment, you must know where you're going. You must know what you want. And this is where vision work comes into play. Not just reacting to whatever life throws at you. That's not alignment. That's bouncing all over the place. Alignment in the journey of becoming who you were born to be is knowing what you want, who you want to be, what you want to do, and what you want to have. I have done this work for years and years through vision boards, and the vision board that I do now really revolves around these archetypes. It's much more specific to connecting to these archetypes within you. If you want to have a look at an example of that, I've shared it on whatever platform you choose to tune into me with, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or in the Substack library, which is really where I want to be connecting with the majority of people. You will see a picture of what that looks like. And I've done one that giving you a picture of what mine is. But this is the clear vision, the alignment of where you want to go. Then we have number 8, which is strength. In the hundreds of vision boards I have done with other women, I began to collate the number one way of being that women wanted to embody. And I was fascinated to discover that it was strength. So who you want to be, we distill down into a list of words. Courageous, confident, audacious was one of the words that I did a whole series on audacity. And the number one word that women chose was strength. And that fascinated me because it wasn't a word that I ever used, which is divine, because it then came into my world. So I went digging. I was like, what does that mean to be strong? What does that mean? Because when I thought about it, the only way I thought about it was, like building your muscles, being able to swing the axe, to chop the wood that we needed to warm our house. That's how I thought about being strong. But this archetype is about the strength within. It is about persistence, endurance, resilience, the strength to stand in the face of opposing opinions, of judgment, of pressure, of all the shoulds that society puts on us. It's the strength to say no as a complete sentence. It's the strength to say that's not correct for me. It's the strength to continue in the knowing that the mission you're on is your mission. And if you stay the course for long enough, you will bring your mission to life. It's the J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter series that got rejected 100 times before somebody finally said yes. But she didn't disconnect when the first person said no. That's strength. It's the strength to stand in the face of fear. This archetype is particularly alive in me at the moment because I'm in the process of writing a piece about it for the Substack library. But the movie that I'm using to really give a fantastic picture of this archetype is The Life of Pi. It's divine alignment. There are no accidents, all the things. The Life of Pi was actually the first date that Laurie took me on. So the first date I took him on was a drive to discover more of this area where I live. And then the first date that he took me on was to see The Life of Pi at the movies. So it was a few years ago. But this movie has just resurfaced because it has all the archetypes. And so if you haven't seen it, I put it on your list to watch this weekend or when you have time. But the essence of it is that there is a boy who is the fool, who embarks on a journey not through his own choosing, but through the universe. God, Mother Nature, the universe says this is the next chapter where you get to learn. And what he learns is to stand in the face of fear, not to conquer, but to live in harmony. Strength is not, there can be an element of force when needed, but more often than not, it's not about force. It's about the strength to stand in the face of fear, of something new, of the unknown, of the elements of the natural world. And so this is strength. And it comes from there to the Hermit. The Hermit is number 9. I want to round this up at the Hermit because I feel that the Hermit archetype has gathered more and more understanding across the world because of the need to reconnect to this aspect of ourselves. The Hermit is stillness. The Hermit is no distractions. There is no fridge to turn to. There's no scrolling on your phone. There's no Netflix. There's no bottle of wine. The Hermit is solitude, stillness, in the dark, reconnecting to the knowing within you, reconnecting to what now. So it's a retreat. And so you can do this through meditation in 5 minutes. Or you can do this over days, sometimes weeks. It's the exploration of the inner world until another light turns on, until the illumination of truth about what's next. So I feel like that's a perfect place to wrap this up. This is the work that I do with women in depth over time. And so if you're interested in working with me one-on-one, over the many, many years that I've been doing this, I have found that there is a language that gets to be learnt in order for true evolution to occur. Our lives are built on 3 things: our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And so in order to embrace a new chapter in your life, in order to connect to the there's a feeling within that I know there is something more that I want to do, be, have. There's more. And in order to connect to that, there is an evolution that gets to happen in the way that we think, in the way that we speak. And then when the thinking and the speaking is in the phase of evolution, then the behavior changes. And what we create in our life next becomes more aligned with the truth of who we're here to become. So if you would like to speak to me about the possibility of working with me as a mentor, then please connect with me wherever feels most comfortable for you, via email or on social media. All right, beautiful souls, that's it from me for the second episode of Maps of Becoming on the Eudaimonia podcast. Thank you so much for being with me. So much love. And bye for now.